Bank's Monetary Policy Committee has kept the benchmark lending rate at 14%. They met for the first time this year on Wednesday after cancelling a January and March meeting due to lack of quorum. A number of departures had reduced the committee from 12 to just 5 members, and the Senate would not approve new names in time. The pace of inflation has steadily slowed since the start of 2017, with the core reading hovering close to the 12% mark. Deji Batmas is in Lagos tonight with more on the MPC decision. So, Deji, holding the policy rate at this point was widely expected by some economists, but should we expect a rate cut by media?
Well, most people would tell you that. I mean, most of these analysts who expected that the MPC was going to hold rate would say yes. I mean, if things continued in the trajectory they are. Remember, one of the key reasons why a lot of people had predicted that there was not going to be a change at all in the monetary policy rate was just because of the level of inflation. It's currently at slightly over 14%. Don't forget that the lending rate in this country, official lending rate that's the monetary policy rate now, is 14%. So a reason why most people didn't expect to see any changes, because you look at the inflation rate and the monetary policy rate almost at the same level. You would want the inflation rate to come down a bit before you see Monetary Policy Committee now begin to tinker with the rate, probably, you know, slice the rates altogether. But of course, since inflation rate is still at slightly over 14%, by the expectation is that as we move on, probably by the middle of the year, inflation rate might come down to somewhere around 13% or 13 point something percent. And maybe at the next MPC meeting, we might see the MPC now stepping now to cut down rates. But I've also been speaking to some analysts now as to what they make of the decision of the MPC earlier today. Even though they expected it, some of them have actually been providing some other insights as to why the MPC decided to take the decision it took earlier today. Take a listen to this.
We were just inaugurated barely a week before the MPC meeting. And you have to recognize the fact that they will rather err on the side of caution. They needed to take their time, settle in, and read through and understand absolutely the macroeconomic variables and the conditions of the economy. I felt that it would be too premature for new members to vote to vary the parameters or the monetary policy parameters, and when they were just barely a week on that desk. So, but I also expect that at subsequent meetings, they will likely going to vote based on their feelings and the beliefs, their philosophies, and their thinking as it relates to the economy.
Although you did mention that inflation is over 14%, or was over 14% in February, and it shed just 200 basis points from mid last year. Why is inflation taking such a long time to decline?
I mean, it's quite understandable, Penina. Nigeria may have exited recession, but growth has been very slow, no doubt about that. Growth is still slow. It's not moving as fast as a lot of people would expect. So that is also partly responsible for why inflation rate is still high. You also have to look at some other issues. For instance, a lot of people had expected, when the last inflation figures were released, a lot of people had expected that the food sub index, for instance, was going to come down rapidly, but we didn't see that. The decline was somewhat marginal, and you could blame that on the crisis. I'm talking about the headers and farmers crisis we have in parts of the country, especially those parts of the country now where the food of this country actually comes from. So all of that, all of these issues now will definitely affect you know, the rate of decline. And, you know, going forward, too, there are also fears that, for instance, when the budget is passed, you would expect that funds will be injected into the economy. That will make so much liquidity available. That could also trigger inflation. So that's why some people are not so optimistic that inflation would come down to as low as 12.4% that the government is projecting for this year. So you still have the budget there. When the budget is passed, you have more funds coming. And, you know, you look at all of this, you don't have a clearer picture at all as to how low inflation could come. And it's definitely a clear pointer that you're going to continue to see this marginal decline as we go forward. We just have to wait for the next figures to come out. Let's see if they will come down to 13-point-something%, as some people have been predicting. And then we wait and see how our Monetary Policy Committee would react.
We will indeed wait and see, Deji. Thanks very much for joining us. Deji Badmas live for us there in